Hi Founder fans, Jason here. Welcome to Founder of the Day, and if you read the thumbnail or the title of this particular article, then you probably are aware of what this video is about. I finally saw Hamilton. Now, this video is going to be pretty much significantly different than most of the videos I make, where I will not be talking about a whole lot of history. I'm going to be talking about the play itself. To be specific, I saw the touring company, which just came through Syracuse, New York, which is the closest, I will call it, a major city to where I live and my life. With that being said, I would like to talk about the show itself. You might not know about me is that I have been a musician for a very long time. And what you also might not know is that I was very close with the theater kids in high school. My best friend was the star, both Danny Zuko and Romeo in the plays. And I dated a young woman who was whoever Danny Zuko dates in Greece. Anyway, as for Hamilton, it was a lot of fun, as always, and I do want to note, I don't want to be very critical of the actors themselves. The touring company is like the minor leagues of theater. You know, they're not on Broadway, which might make people say, oh, it must not be good, but no, if you are in the touring company, your next step is Broadway. You are going to the show, as they say, if you play your cards right and put on a proper performance. With that out of the way, if you go see a band that you absolutely love or an artist that you love 10 times, they might put on 8 perfect shows. And then they might put on one fine show. And then they might have a bad show. And every once in a while, people do have a bad show. Now, I don't think anyone in the performance had a bad show, but I wanted to keep that in mind when I do offer my criticisms, because there are some people I wasn't necessarily enthralled with. But that may very well be because it just wasn't their night. With that, we'll start off. I do have my book here in front of me because I want to make sure I hit most of the major characters. First of all, Alexander Hamilton. The gentleman, Pierre-Jean Gonzalez. I know nothing about any of these people going in. He does look very similar to Lin-Manuel Miranda. And to be fair, I was pretty far back, so everyone looked fairly similar from that distance. And the set is almost exactly what it is if you have seen it on Broadway or if you've seen the Disney movie. Also, I should side note, for anyone who doesn't care about theater, I do recommend you check out the play. If you take the time out of your life to watch a random guy on a very small channel talk about obscure facts of the American Revolution, then you probably like the Revolution enough where you should grin and bite it and see the play, because there's so much revolution packed into it, and it's a lot of fun. You know, they come across a few random founders that we would discuss here on Founder of the Day you don't usually hear about in the world. That being said, the the Hamilton character, I don't want to call him the Lin-Manuel Miranda character, the Hamilton character himself, as I said, some people don't have a perfect night every night. This gentleman seems to have had a little slow start after the show. My wife and I were both discussing it and thought, oh, he wasn't necessarily perfect. Now, was he at the beginning? Now, by the time the second act comes around, couldn't tell. He was Lin-Manuel Miranda. He did a great job. The first act, my complaint, it would really be he didn't have necessarily the anger Alexander Hamilton usually has, that Lin-Manuel Miranda himself did very well. But as I said, once they get into the more meatier stuff in the later part, this particular actor was a lot better at the more emotional stuff in the play than the angry let's go to war stuff, and that's fine. Like I said, by the time the second act came around, he was doing a great job. Looked the part and everything. Next is Eliza Hamilton. Some of the female parts in the play, I'll put it like this. I go to the play for the American Revolution. And while you want to build a nice story, I'm sure, and include various characters and different storylines in an almost 3-hour musical, of course you want to make sure you get the women's stories told in there. And you definitely do. And he does. To be honest, I personally feel like the play itself, as great as it is, spends a little too much time on Eliza being sad when I want to see, you know, politics. But that's me, and that's not for everyone. Though I will also note my bride, who is not particularly as my wife, who is not particularly as attached to the history as I am, and also likes musicals like I do, said the same thing. It does kind of drag. That's not the fault of Eliza in the play. That's how the play's written. I know you're not allowed to criticize the holy Hamilton, but that was one of my criticisms. In general. But she basically is a spitting image of the character you see in the movie, and many of the people were. Aaron Burr, for example, probably the best actor that I saw out there, if I'm being honest. Really did a very good job, just like the other gentleman in the regular play. I will say, maybe I should save it for the king, but at one point, the king actually gets him to break character, and he's like giggling. One of the later songs, I believe it's the one, Never Gonna Be President Now. It's like bouncy and fun. The king kind of comes out and does a little dance. Spoiler alert, shit, sorry. Which I wasn't expecting. And neither was the guy playing Burr, because he started laughing on stage, which was probably the most embarrassing thing for his whole entire life. But, he held it together and finished the song and got back on track, of course, but it was one of the fun things about seeing live shows is that, as I said before, they're not always perfect, but sometimes you get something special. Speaking of something special, I'm going to jump ahead to the Thomas Jefferson character. The guy who played Jefferson, I don't believe was the same guy. Warren Egypt Franklin played Lafayette and Jefferson. He was great. He did a lot of what I like live shows to do. He was one of the few people who weren't necessarily exactly as you hear in the soundtrack or exactly as you see in the play. It was all the same lines and all the same songs, but he had his own little flair about it. That David Diggs, obviously has his own flair if you've seen the play. Keep going back to Lin-Manuel. This Mr. Franklin had a really his own vibe, and he gave the character its own essence. He said certain lines different ways than you were expecting it, even though it was the same line, and he was able to draw laughter out of the crowd and just be a really lovable character that you grew attached to, which as someone who reads a lot of anti-federalists work, I was happy to see the Jefferson character get that kind of love. On top of this, Angelica Schuyler was really, really good. As was the Peggy character. Like I said, the women in the show, I will say, were just right. They were baby bears porridge. They weren't doing necessarily anything special, but they were exactly as portrayed everywhere else that you've seen the show. And really good singers, really good voices. Side note, the bass player in the orchestra was awesome. I was not expecting to be like I said, I've been a musician a long time, and I particularly fond of the bass. And there were a few just certain touches that the bass player had, playing all the same notes. Just like as I said, some of the musicians might sing the same line, but they give it their own flair. The bass player, just a few times, I was like, ooh, I forgot I was watching a musical, and I was like, oh, that was amazing. And I wanted to give him a shout out because I'm sure no one gives the bass player a shout out when they're watching a musical. So I wanted the whole orchestra was good, but the bass player, top notch. Don't know who his name is. Anyway, one complaint I had about one of the characters is George Washington. And this is a real, I feel bad saying this, to be honest with you. But the Washington character was short. I'll put it like this. He wasn't like the shortest person out there, but he was significantly shorter than the Jefferson character. Now, there's two sides of this. There's me being a history nerd side, who's saying, well, actually, he was the same height as Jefferson. I think they were both 6'2", so they were both towering figures for their day, when the average height was about 5'8". But then there's the musical side of me. Just plain watching a musical, if this wasn't based on history, this was just written out. The character of Washington is supposed to be a commanding figure. He's supposed to walk on stage. Like, there's a whole song, Here Comes the General, Here He Comes. And he's supposed to walk out and be a towering presence. And I certainly don't mean to offend this guy or short shame this gentleman. What's his name? Marshall Coy, it looks like it's pronounced. He was a great singer and a wonderful actor, and he did a beautiful job with the part. And I'm also not one of these people, I know there's a small section of people out there who are not happy that, there's like a black dude playing George Washington. Obviously, I don't care about that at all. But if you have a character in a show who's supposed to just command respect with his presence, you're supposed to either have them be taller than everyone else or put them in situations where you don't know they're not as tall. Which, for example, I'm going to get to the king in a minute, King George. I don't know how tall King George was. They kept him away from everyone. So he could have been, 2 foot nothing. But he had a commanding presence because of the way they staged the play. So, not this guy's fault. He's probably not short. He's probably about my height, but the gentleman playing Jefferson next to him was like probably 4 or 5 inches taller. I was pretty far back in the audience, and I noticed a significant difference there. Again, like I said, in the original cast, I'm sure Daveed Diggs may very well be taller than the gentleman who played Washington in the original. His name escapes me now. I know when he was a child, he was Simba, the original Simba in Lion King. So I know enough about him to know what he was doing as a child, but I cannot right now recall his name. Let me know in the comments if you remember his name. I am a little bit embarrassed not to remember. I think he's shorter than Daveed Diggs, but he had that certain particular je ne sais quoi, that commanding presence that, the general needs in any kind of production. In my personal opinion, again, I don't want to offend this guy. He was an awesome actor. He did a really great job. The One Last Time song got to me, as it always does. But it's just one of those weird. It's not even that I'm not criticizing the actor. I'm criticizing the casting director, actually, if you will. That being said, like I said, Eliza and Angelica were fine. The guy who played John Lawrence did a very good job. And then the guy who played James Madison and Hercules Mulligan, what is his name? Desmond Sean Ellington. That gentleman, Christopher Neil Jackson. Thank you, Sue. Christopher Neil Jackson. He was Simba as a child. He was taller than this as a child, but I'm on camera. He was the original Simba in The Lion King on Broadway. Great actor. Always my George Washington. Not that old dude with the wig. Although Washington didn't really wear a wig. Let's not talk about the history, though. The guy who played Hercules Mulligan and James Madison, amazing job. As I was saying earlier, certain of the actors made the part their own while keeping it in line with what everyone expected. If anyone did this, it was him and King George. I'm gonna get to King George. He just really good. Many of the lines, and I don't want to say too many lines of the play in case you haven't seen it. See it. When he was Hercules Mulligan. Oh, and I should note, for those of you who haven't seen it, many of the people play certain characters during the war in the 1770s, 1780s at the beginning of the show, and then play different people entirely in the 1790s for the second act. One of these people played John Lawrence as a younger man, this Mr. Ellington, and then played not Philip Hamilton. Oh, James Madison in the second act. In the first act, he was Hercules Mulligan, just as you expected him. In the second act, he was James Madison, but with a little more confidence. Just a little more confidence. We always think of James Madison as a puny little guy who was weaseling his way around. Well, James Madison was one of the smartest people hanging around at that time. And to be fair, a plantation owner. So that would, as a member of maybe a lower member of the elite, but as a member of the Virginia elite, he would have had confidence. And this character really put that out there. I would say I haven't seen the original on Broadway. I've listened to the music hundreds of times. And I've watched Disney released it. This is the one character that I think actually did a better job than the original production. That creaking is one of my cats deciding to leave the room. He actually did a better job than the original production. And even, I will say the other person is the guy who played John Lawrence, Philip Hamilton. I think actually one-upped that other gentleman. Not to offend those people, but I also had the live experience, which makes it special. As I said it the whole time, might not be perfect, and it wasn't perfect. That's what's fun about it. But these two people were particularly special. I don't remember if I've talked about the Thomas Jefferson character. I said he was taller than everyone else. He is also one of these people that just gave it his own flair. The name is I want to try and say as many of their names as I can, because one day they'll make it to the show. Yes, Warren Egypt Franklin. It's a badass name. Good job at Mr. Warren Egypt Franklin's parents. With that being said, we should move on to King George. King George was, I hate to say it, probably the best part of the show. To be fair, he has the smallest part. It has the least to do. But again, unlike what you see in the show, he made it his own, and it was fun. Most of the characters got a laugh or two out of people. He got applause, laughter, like mid-song applause, which you don't often get at a Broadway show. Uh, as I said, in all it was just a little bit different. The same vibe as what you see in the movie around Broadway from the original cast, but a little bit more. I don't even know how to say it. Quirky. And as I mentioned earlier, he comes out during one of the later songs and does a little. First, he plies, I think is the term, when you jump in the air and do like a ballerina twinkle with your feet. I'm not a dancer. I don't know that part. He does that, and it was. He then starts doing like a not good hip hop dance, and he actually got Aaron Burr to break. Aaron Burr, who I have seen argued as the hero of this play. I know it's hard to hear, but I've actually heard people make arguments that Hamilton is the bad guy in the play and Burr's the good guy, which makes sense. I mean, Hamilton keeps accusing Burr of being wishy-washy and not choosing a side, and Burr is basically saying, I'm an objective politician who is not towing the party line. Imagine if we had some of those around nowadays. That's why Burr became the third vice president of the United States. I've gotten off topic. More of my Aaron Burr being an Aaron Burr apologist. That being said, who did I leave out? The dancing was good. There were some weird things. Some of the dancing was a little over the top. Where like one guy took a book and like danced with it like a basketball, which I thought was awkward. Just one of the people in the ensemble. I don't want to criticize it. I'm sure it's mostly a lot of the original dancing, and a lot of the stuff was really cool. In fact, what they do with the bullet, and this is a spoiler alert. I'm not even going to exactly describe how it happens. I think that's the way. I don't remember I don't really remember the Disney movie, all of it. I watched it kind of back and forth. I watched it live here, but I couldn't play it, and I was like commenting on it the whole time. But the way they showed the bullet traveling from a gun to the dual loser is really cool. So, and that's essentially it. Now, with that, now that I've spent 20 minutes bragging that I got to see Hamilton, I do recommend, if you can afford it, they are expensive. We saved up for a while to go see it. But if you do have the opportunity, if it comes through your town, I do recommend it. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're a fan of like sports, the touring company is like the minor leagues to get to the show that is Broadway, to get to the major leagues that is Broadway. So these are highly trained, highly skilled actors doing their best to go pro. They are pro, and they're doing their best to hit that pinnacle. This is how they make their mark. This is how they prove to Broadway that they deserve to be on Broadway, is with the touring company. So don't let it throw you off that they're on tour. These are good shows. I've seen several come through this area. And, side note, like I did grow up down on Long Island. So I have seen, humble brag, I have seen Broadway, a lot of it as a young person. So now that I live further away and I'm seeing it on tour, some of these shows are just as good. Though, as I mentioned, not every band has every show is perfect. I'm sure if you see the Beatles 10 times, 9 of them are going to be great, and one of them won't be so great. Although I also heard the Beatles weren't great live because they couldn't even hear themselves playing because everyone was screaming so loud. But that's a story for a different day. With that, I will close off here. Thank you for watching. Go see it if you can. If you can't, see it over on Disney. I am going to put together a playlist. You'd think I know how to make a Spotify playlist. I'm going to make a Spotify playlist of my top historical songs for Hamilton, cutting out kind of all the filler, the mushy stuff in the middle. Honestly, from my personal opinion, much of the second act, the political stuff, there's about 6 songs on there that if you put them together are the best description of the George Washington administration that's really ever been put into media. You don't see a lot of movies about the George Washington administration or TV shows or anything like that. And some of the songs on there are amazing. The rap battles, and I know not everyone necessarily listens to rap, but there's short songs where they condense the actual arguments between Jefferson and Hamilton in George Washington's cabinet into sound bites, sure, but really well put together to the point where I listen to it, and this is I'm going to release some of my non-objective personal opinion here. I listen to it and I think, wow, Thomas Jefferson definitely told Hamilton what was up in that conversation, didn't he? And I've heard interviews with Lin-Manuel Miranda, the man who wrote these words, say that Hamilton won. And that's why I think he did such a good job with it, is that you can listen to it and get into the arguments fairly objectively. They're being mean to each other on stage, which is close to true. Well, let's be honest, they did not use those words at the time. Those would have been dueling words, but yeah, I'm gonna put together that playlist for you guys because there's just a lot of good stuff on there. And man, dude, if you like the American Revolution and you listen to George Washington and his farewell address and you don't get teary-eyed, you don't have a soul, you gotta go learn about the Civil War or something. This is not for you. And before we go, I see a few things here. Sue, I think you can spoil the lines. Yeah, the soundtrack has been played out for many years. I know. I tried not to listen to the Hamilton soundtrack for years because I didn't want to hear it before I saw the show. And then I, was starting Founder of the Day and was like, people are going to ask me about this. I should probably listen to it. And that's a good idea because I just hit 4 years doing Founder of the Day. So I would still not have heard any of the songs after, what did it come out, 10 years ago at this point? Nick, I wish they would tour in Arizona. Wouldn't mind watching Hamilton. It's a great show. If I haven't made that clear yet, I wouldn't be surprised if it came through Arizona. I mean, I'm sure it's in Phoenix. You guys don't be very good with hockey teams out there. But sorry, I hope that's not a sore subject for you. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. If Phoenix or even several of the other cities in Arizona got a show out there. Though I believe there's just one company on tour and it stays for a month. It's in Syracuse for a month. The thing is, I almost went to Rochester, which is an hour and a half from here, 2 years ago to see it. But then I was like, oh, it looks like they're coming to Syracuse next year. And then, the plague hit and that didn't happen. But yeah, they move around. Oh, Nick, you're a Coyotes fan? Well, at least next season you'll get a very personalized experience when it comes to watching hockey. Actually, my father and I were discussing flying. Sorry, Hamilton fans, we're going to have to talk about hockey for a second. My father and I were considering flying out to Arizona because, if you don't know, the Arizona Coyotes don't pay their bills, and they have to play at a college in front of 5,000 people, which is way too small to be a professional hockey team. It's actually too small to be a minor league team. The touring company wouldn't even play there, but if I get to come see the New York Hockey Rangers with 3,000 other people, we might, rack up some debt to go see that. So anyway, back to Hamilton. You guys know, come see it. As for the songs themselves, I haven't talked about the history of the songs really at all. I'm going to. Now, to be fair, I did do kind of a live watch along of Hamilton, a year and a half ago maybe, whenever the Disney movie came out. I went through it quick. But there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of information to unpack here. The last thing I should note, by the way, is I've had people ask, do you like The Patriot? The movie, the Mel Gibson movie, The Patriot. Do you like that movie? Because there's no real history in it. It's all made up. They took a bunch of stories from founders they liked and crammed them all together. My answer has always been yeah. Because that's one of those movies that I saw as a kid and was like, oh, cool, I want to learn more about this. Maybe it was wrong, but I learned more about it and it drew my interest into the American Revolution and history in general. I felt the same way listening to the soundtrack to Hamilton over the last few years. And now I sat down and watched it with a room full of people. And I am conflicted because I know most of the people there were probably there because they like musicals and they wanted to see a good musical. And they learned a little something about the American Revolution. And I also became conflicted because I noticed there were a couple thousand people being constantly fed not so nuanced information and some outright wrong information. And I am conflicted about it. So I think I'm going to start this Saturday, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but I am going to go through the songs of Hamilton. I am going to go line by line, like we do with our read-alongs, and talk about it. So, please join me. Now, I was thinking about doing it in 2 parts because it's 2 acts, right? But the songs themselves, if you just sing through them, are like an hour and a half each. So if I'm going to go line by line and be more nuanced about it, I think it's going to take quite some time. So I don't know if I do like a marathon or what. I'm still figuring that out. What I'm thinking about doing is doing maybe 3 songs at a time or 5 songs at a time. Any songs that go together. To elaborate on excuse me, because there's so much. Like, for example, there's one line that bugs me. It's when Angelica's singing, "I have found a wealthy husband. He is not a lot of fun." Now, that took like no time out of the 3-hour musical. But no, her husband, John Barker Church, was a lot of fun. He ran as a fake name for a while. They eloped and fled to France. He investigated her father. He's the one who lent Hamilton the guns he got shot with. So to say he's not a lot of fun is wrong. Just wrong. And if you reflect back on the earlier line, I'm a girl in which my only job is to marry rich. Well, she didn't. She married a guy who fled England under an assumed name because the gambling debts he racked up. So we can talk about things like that are, most people would come away from the play thinking, oh, poor Angelica, she didn't marry Hamilton. He's not a lot of fun. It's like, well, there's no evidence that they actually had a relationship. And she did marry John Barker Church. A sweet, a dude, cool enough. I mean, he ends up, when he's in France, he helps start one of the first banks in the United States, and Hamilton is his go-to man when Hamilton starts the banks and the stock exchange. Go Wall Street, yay! I was probably one of the only people in the theater to see Hamilton lose the duel and say to myself, God. Now, I have lost all objectivity at this point. Usually on the channel, I try and be as objective as I can. Although, if you watch the Federalist read-alongs, you'll notice that it's hard to keep my biases quiet. But so I'm figuring out how to do that. Expect on Saturday night to do the beginning of that. What I'm thinking is I will turn it on. We'll see how it goes. If we hit an hour, we'll cut it at the end of the song and see how many years it takes. With that, I am Jason. I am your humble and obedient servant. I do appreciate you taking the time, especially with this video, which is way different than any of the other content I put out. It's a little bit more rambly, obviously. I've said the word a lot more than I usually do. But with that, yeah, I will put together that Spotify playlist. Absolutely, Sue. Look forward to it. I've been kind of mulling it over in my head for literally years, probably since I started Founder of the Day. I just need to. My relationship with Spotify is play. Search, song I want to hear, play. Usually it's an album. I'm a CD kid. I'm the CD generation. And so I don't know the names of songs. I know the names of CDs and track numbers. With that, I'm going to call it a night. Thank you so much, guys. I will be back. Today is Thursday, so tomorrow's trivia, and that's always fun. And then the day after that is Saturday. We're going to go through some Hamilton lyrics, start from the beginning, and see what we can unpack from that musical. See if we can miscorrect the unfactuals. Those aren't words. We'll see if we can get things straight. Thank you again. I'll repeat my new kind of sign-off line I'm working with. I am your humble and obedient servant, and I'll be back with more American Revolution very soon. Did I keep hitting the wrong button? No, I just missed it. Oh. So what's happening now is there was an update to the software I use. Usually I hit the button and it closes out to my end screen, but I guess the update removed that, and now I'm embarrassed, and I'm going to say goodbye for a third time. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.